The first year of F1 is officially in the books here in Las Vegas. Who did it benefit and who did it not benefit? That's what I'm going to cover in this video. This is going to be one of my more unpolished videos because I got a whole bunch of stuff to try to cover when it comes to this event. So looking at it from different perspectives, which I know a lot of you appreciate on my channel. So we're going to be talking about this race from the perspective of locals, tourists, casinos, and F1 themselves. I think there's a very important piece that is not getting a lot of attention when it comes to F1 in this whole situation. So this is a lot to put together. I did my best. If there's something I missed, hey, please feel free to share. Another angle you want to share, please feel free to share that as well. So I do have to say that, I've been creating content now here since 2014, all right, in Las Vegas. And in the time I've been doing that, I can absolutely say that this has been the most divisive event I've ever seen in Las Vegas. From the preparation of it to now that it's over. And even the post-race reports on media that you're seeing were very split in some ways, right? Fox 5 put out an article right after the race saying that it exceeded expectations. The Sports Illustrated put one out that said it was a flop. So depending on what you're looking at, you're going to get some very different viewpoints, and you're going to see why that is as we go through this. And depending on whose viewpoint you're looking from, would you say it was great or it was a flop? Now, I'm going to kick this off like I did the video before the race, talking about, will it be worth it for Vegas? And this is the tweet from Andrew Neem on Twitter. So he summarizes very well. He said, wild to think how many total hours have been lost by Las Vegas commuters due to the F1 construction. What is the metric by which the event will be determined worth it to them? Surely it's dollars generated for the economy, but how many dollars and who sees it? That is a great way to put it and set the foundation for what we're going to be talking about. Now, the local versus tourist perspective in this, okay? The tourists were more likely or more prone to think that, it was a success, or they're more likely to just like the race because they come for the weekend, right? They come here for the handful of days, in this case for the Grand Prix, or just, for a normal weekend or any other event that they're coming into town. So, as far as the F1, as far as the first Grand Prix, many thought the race itself was one of the better ones of the year. Some people thought the event was great. They were excited. They love the energy here. They can't wait to come back, for next year. That was fairly common sentiment among a lot of the tourists who came here. Now, I know there were some tourists and, even locals who were there at the race who paid tickets. They're upset with Thursday night. They're upset with Thursday night, right, which resulted in the class action lawsuits. One person in attendance who's one of my subscribers I met, told me he wasn't happy with Thursday night, and also that, he bought his ticket for $2,700 early on when they were released, and that he checked the ticket price, right before the race, and it was down to $1,000. So if he had just waited until, the race got closer, he could have got his ticket for a lot cheaper. And that's going to be a big factor in years going forward, is the demand and the price and how much money is actually going to be made in this race. For the local aspect of this, I did see a handful of locals online who, either before the race said they were excited for the race to be coming here, or during it went to the race and, they said they enjoyed themselves, they had fun. But none of those people said they work on the Strip and that they were impacted by the preparation. I still have not heard one single Strip employee who was impacted by this, that works on the Strip, say that they were excited for it. So again, even among the locals, you're kind of seeing some split. Now, the long and short of it, when it comes to this event, is that a handful of the major properties crushed it. Like, especially if you're like one of the luxury properties. So if you were Aria, Cosmo, Bellagio, Venetian, Wynn, right? You were really busy. Those places sounds like they did really well. Caesar's Palace, I think, did. So ultimately, some properties did do really well. Other properties just did not. So even just, I talked to one dealer at the Bellagio who said just over across the street at Paris did not do well. I was told Planet Hollywood did not do well. I walked through Horseshoe one night over the weekend, and I talked to one of the employees there who recognized me. And, they said they were, really let down by what they were seeing. Also, other places, not in the right on the center of the Strip. So the North Strip got essentially no benefit. Downtown, from what I'm being told, got no benefit from people I've talked to. At other places, just in the general area, like, Hofbrauhaus was a news report. They did not do well. They were not busy. Virgin Hotel right near them did not do well. So several restaurants I know from news reports and people I've talked to accidentally end up, overstaffing because they thought they were going to be busy. They were hoping they would be, and they weren't. So they actually had, way more staff than they needed for that night. That's really what's the long and short of it. A handful of places and properties, particularly the higher end ones, did really well because, you think of the F1 demographic, that's what they like. I was at Bellagio after the race, gambling between 1 and 2 in the morning, and I put out the tweet showing the people that I saw, how full the place was, the amount of the high table limits I saw in different areas, and people were playing, and they were enjoying themselves, and they were having fun. But that was not the case for much of the Vegas area. Now, some of you probably saw the report on social media that came out about how much the Wynn dealers made over at the Wynn. And they did really well. Now, was that enough money that they made in that weekend to offset the 6 to 8 months of disruption that they may have faced by F1? Because Wynn is on the outer portion of the track, so I don't know how much they were directly, their employees were impacted by it. Although they probably were, because their parking is actually right near the construction. So, that question, was it enough to offset that? Maybe, maybe not. I tend to think it's probably not. One thing I did hear from a dealer at Aria is that they did even better than the Wynn dealers. So then I wanted to disclose the amount. I said, hey, fine, don't worry about it, but that they actually did even better than that. But again, though, is that enough to make up for the 6 to 8 months of construction and all the disruption that they had to go through? Caesar's Palace, I talked to a dealer there who said that, for them, for the dealers at Caesar's Palace, yes, F1 weekend was better than a normal weekend. It was busier than normal. And, with this being like one of the slower weeks of the year, or that weekend being one of the slower weeks of the year typically, yes, they were busier than normal, but this person said it was not enough to make up for the 6 months of the construction, all the issues at that, nowhere near it. This dealer said that they made more money last year during Super Bowl weekend here in Las Vegas than they did during the F1 weekend here this year, right? The Super Bowl is going to be here in the next couple months here in Las Vegas. They expect to do well for that. But this dealer also said that they do not want to work F1 ever again. So even for the places who did, well, it's probably up in the air as to whether or not that money they made makes up for the 6 months of all the issues they had, getting ready for this. So, and if you're a place where you did a little bit better or you did not do better, then they're definitely going to say, no, it was not worth it for them. So again, we have, definitely we can have another split on that one as well. Now, that is one of the huge differences between F1 and how it was a big weekend here, expected to be a big weekend here versus other big weekends, okay? Because when we have other big weekends here in Vegas, Super Bowl, opening weekend of March Madness, Memorial Day, Labor Day weekend, when those events happen and there's 200,000 to 300,000 people here in town, everywhere is busy, okay? The Vegas Valley all over the place is busy. Not just the Strip, or not just a handful of places on the Strip, but all across the Strip. The properties near the Strip, downtown, even properties well off the Strip. Those are huge weekends where every place is busy. Every place is making money, right? So that was the thing that was unique about F1, is the money was so concentrated in just a handful of places, which is why I say seems, it's going to be very divisive, because only a handful of the casinos really got the bulk of the benefit of this race being here. The small businesses in leading up to this, for the preparation, there were small businesses, negatively impacted this, that were negatively impacted by this preparation, that collectively lost millions of dollars, millions, that they are very unlikely to get back from this race in future years. I'll give you a little bit more details on it here. So, after 6 months of the construction, Jay's Market over on Flamingo and Koval, they were in a New York Times article that I interviewed for, but ended up not being in the article. But the guy who wrote it, I suggest a couple places for him to go to. One of them was a gas station, another one was Batista's, we'll talk about here. But Jay's Market in that article showed that they were down $2.2 million in revenue from the year before. $2.2 million that they had lost because of all the construction taking place. And they had to lay off 7 of their 12 employees. So over half the employees, the guy had to lay off just because his profits and his revenue for the business were down so much. The Arco gas station near there too, they were in an article saying that they typically sell between 5,000 to 6,000 gallons of gas a day. And they had days where they were only selling just over 200. So they had times they were at 90+% loss of their typical sales for how much gas they sell. I mean, that's going to be crushing to a business. If anybody personally lost income like that, if you lost your income like that for any extended period of time, you're probably going to be hurting big time. In the same articles, Batista's Hole in the Wall, for those of you that are familiar with the place, that's been there for years. The owner there said, his nightly dinner revenue was down about $6,000 a night. $6,000 a night. And he had to stop paying himself. So he said he stopped paying himself and he had to cut his staff's quarterly bonuses. I mean, think of that, $6,000 a night, 30 days a month, $180,000 a month, say times that by 6 months or so. I mean, we're pushing close to $1 million just for that place, right? These are estimates, of course, but just between those two places, that's millions, not including any other places around the area that also lost. So some of these small businesses were hit really hard. And, the question would be is if F1 even does choose to extend it to 10 years, right? Is a 3-day race event, right? A 3-day race once a year going to make up for the $180,000 that Batista's lost for each month for 6 months? Is that going to make up for the $2.2 million the gas station has lost this year from last year? They would need to get that money back just to get back to where they're normally operating at. So, if it's 9 more years of this race, are they going to get that money back, over those 27 days or so? I think it's pretty unlikely that they will. So some of these businesses, these local ones here, took a huge hit that they're probably not going to be able to recover their money from. Another issue that came with the race, all right, the bridges, the escalators, blocking the views so people won't watch from the bridge. That did piss people off. That pissed a lot of people off. Some cited, safety, so that the walkways for the bridges aren't blocked. And then there was a debate about, okay, well then, you're trying to have a ticketed event in a very public place. So some people are saying, well, you need to buy a ticket if you want to watch the race. Others are talking about how, well, this is a public bridge, these are public sidewalks, and you're trying to have this private event on, one of the most public streets and one of the most, heavily foot trafficked streets in all of the United States. So there's going to be issues with that, and there certainly were issues with that. This brings to the next issue. Some of you have asked about this, about the Clark County Commission possibly passing an ordinance going into effect to prevent people from loitering on the bridges and the escalators, because there were people who were getting, trying to watch from the bridges, people going up and down the escalators and getting to watch the race, essentially for free, getting to see whatever they could, just going up and down the escalators or finding spots here and there. So 2 issues with that. One is the constitutionality of it, okay, of passing something like that on a taxpayer-funded walkway. Okay, here in Vegas, lots of people don't realize, like, you see those ball and cup scams and 3-cart Monte scams, you see those happening on the sidewalks and pedestrian bridges because those are public property, right? So private casino security cannot go out there on private property and do anything about it because it's on public property. So the private security has no jurisdiction over public property. That is something the police have to handle. That's why those scams lots of times happen on the sidewalks and the pedestrian bridges, because only the police can respond and do anything about it. Private security cannot. So you have that aspect of public versus private. And then 2, if it is passed, how's it going to be enforced? Because there is nowhere near enough physical manpower to actually enforce that along this 4-mile stretch that many of us call the Strip here in Las Vegas, for all the different pedestrian bridges they have, and more to come, more planned to come in the future, that connect the different hotels and casinos here, and all the escalators, which oftentimes are broken anyway. But how are you going to enforce it? Even if you pass this and on paper, it's written in paper, any law that's on paper is only as good as its ability to be enforced. So you can have the law on paper, you can have the ordinance, but if you can't enforce it, then what good is it? The other issue that can come is, say this actually does go through, is it puts your police in a very difficult spot to enforce something like this. Okay, you're putting them in a really tough area here, because how do you expect officers to remember all these people, all these faces going by here on the Strip? Many of you have been here where there's 100, 200,000 plus people here, right? Say there's 100,000 people here. You think they're going to remember every single person's face who goes by and, rides the escalator up and down several times, right? There's over 100,000 people here, right? And if they get the wrong person, say they grab the wrong person, mistaken identity, that's going to look very, very bad. And it's putting the law enforcement officers here in an incredibly difficult position. So I don't know how it's going to go. I can't think of a way that it's going to go well if it passes. I have a hard time thinking that it's going to go well. So, and if they do pass it, and say they don't enforce it, all year long, except for the few days that, the Grand Prix is taking place here, so they're only going to enforce it when the biggest companies in Nevada are set to make a huge amount of money. Well, that's only going to piss people off more, because it's going to divide people more. It's like, okay, so you pass the ordinance just for these few days to cater to the biggest companies, but the rest of the year you don't care about it. It's just for these few days you want to enforce this. That's going to piss people off and piss off locals big time. And remember, next year, 2024, is an election year here in the area. So a lot of this is going to be interesting to see how this factors in to the upcoming elections, because the locals are a huge part of this. I know the tourists are a bigger demographic, and on media, right, there's going to be more tourists commenting on this than locals, but the locals are the ones who ultimately vote here. Now, because of some of these issues, and particularly among the local population with F1, I think F1 and the Clark County Commission going forward, especially in the very immediate future, but going forward, we'll see how it goes, I think they're going to have a hard time getting support from the local population. Okay, some of this, a lot of this just stems from how F1 came into the Vegas market. Absolutely just terrible way that they entered the Las Vegas community here. From, getting the tax money for the first responders up front, which is not something that normally happens in big events, to threatening to block views of the businesses here and trying to charge per head, to wanting more tax money during the construction with all of this. So, they came in a very bad way, right? The Clark County Commission obviously left a lot of people in the dark, particularly the hospitality workers here when it came to this whole thing, right? Not having police presence out during all this traffic that was going on to help, manage the whole situation. So, definitely fault on both ends of it for how this was executed. And even said as it was being executed, there were still some things, like I mentioned, that could have been done to try to help improve it. They could have done better throughout the process that just made it even worse. So some of it was damage control that's been done, before and after the situation, right? So, Liberty Media CEO apologized as the race got closer. Public apology doesn't really significantly change anything here on the ground level. F1 offered some discount local tickets to people. Also, as the race got closer, F1 offered discounted F1 gear to locals after the race. They said as a token of appreciation. I know they got some backlash on social media for that one. Especially the token of appreciation part of it. And then the other thing, this was weird. This is something I caught too, I thought was unusual. Now, I've seen it reported that there were 315,000 viewers for this event. I saw that several places, 315,000 viewers. I'm like, okay, but there's, reported to be 105,000 people who came to town. I'm like, are they adding all the days together? And I found in one article, that's what they did. They said 315,000 viewers over the 4 days, versus just saying 105,000. Now that caught my attention because I cannot think of a time in any other event here in Las Vegas where I have heard the amount of visitors counted like that. Like when a big event comes, say Memorial Day weekend, they say, there's gonna be 200,000 people coming to Las Vegas for the weekend. It's 200,000 for the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I've never heard them say, there were 600,000 visitors in Vegas over the weekend, right? Like 200 on Friday, 200 Saturday, and 200 Sunday. I cannot think of a time I've ever seen it counted that way before. So the fact that it was counted this way, as if, each day was like 105,000 individual different people, was kind of strange to me. Because I've seen this trip with 200 to 300,000 people here before. And this weekend for F1, there was nowhere near 200 to 300,000 people there on the strip. So that stood out to me too as kind of unusual that they reported the numbers that way. Now, the Clark County Commission going into this did name some benefits leading up to the race, but you're going to see that these are very surface level with some of these things that were talked about.
Is it okay for Clark County to basically let the race happen and sort out who's going to pay for it months from now?
It's okay with us.
In defense, the commissioner points to financing the county receives, $100 million in taxes that he says may benefit sectors like education and healthcare. $1.3 billion expected in spending that stays in the valley. So far, 7,700 jobs created, yielding a $360 million payroll.
That is all a benefit to us. So it has not all been sacrifice, a lot of sacrifice, but not all.
The $100 million in tax revenue that may benefit sectors like education and healthcare. Well, they may, but they also may not. So there's absolutely nothing concrete in that statement. And that's essentially a useless statement to say it may, Well, it also may not. But the reason they, point out education and healthcare, because those are two things that a lot of people publicly, they would look bad if they spoke out against them, right? It's like if you say, oh, well, you don't want money to go to education, you don't want money to go to healthcare, right? It kind of makes you look bad. So, you don't speak out against it. So that's why they chose those two, to say those two. But where's the money going to go? Where's the money really going to go? And even if they say the money's going to go to schools, which is very common in the world of politics, say money's going to go to school, it's going to go to the children, right? It has happened before here in Las Vegas when tax revenue that was supposed to go to schools magically ends up going somewhere else. We have seen sales tax go up that was supposed to go to the schools. That's how they got people to vote for it. But afterwards, then the money was opened up to go to other parts of the government. As far as the $1.3 billion in spending, it stays right here. There were no details given on that. The 7,700 jobs with a payroll of $360 million that have been created, again, no details on that. This is very surface level. Because some important questions, if you just do the basic math, you'll see $360 million divided by 7,700 jobs, $46,750 per person. Okay, now I'm sure that not everyone got that same exact amount. Some people were full-time, some were part-time, but we don't know. We're not told how many full-time, how many part-time. We're not told how many of these are permanent jobs, how many of these are temporary jobs. Because especially in the world of construction, it's very common for people to go take a job somewhere where they work for 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, a year, or whatever it is. And once that job is done, they go off to somewhere else. So we have none of those details. We just have the very surface level numbers. We have no depth, no substance, particularly for the locals, to help convince them that this was actually going to be good for them. So that's what I mean when I say I think they're going to have a hard time getting the locals to believe that this was to their benefit. And the other thing is, as far as the $40 million in public money that F1 asked for, I've not heard anything about that yet. I have not heard anything about that public money of $40 million going to F1, and maybe we never will. Maybe it'll just go away. Instead of saying no or being any kind of press release, it'll just, just kind of fade away and handle it that way. Preparations will have to go in place again for F1, but not as much as this year. Okay, this year is expected to be the worst year of it. Now, how much preparation there ends up, being later in 2024, we'll see. Because right now they're still taking stuff down, and this takedown has affected, certainly places here on the Strip. I just got a notice I saw today, the day I'm filming this, about certain road closures going down to 1 lanes because they have to break down. Still have a whole lot more to do with breaking everything down. So, this impact is not just beforehand, but also being felt afterwards as well. And I want to mention one final important note that I think keeps getting overlooked with this. So, as I've been talking about this, and so many other people have been talking about this, there's always so much of it centers around, okay, F1's impact on Vegas, right? How is F1 impacting Vegas? And understandable, because I live here, I make Vegas content, right? Plenty of other people have talked about Vegas, the impact F1, is having on Vegas. Well, remember, this is a two-way street. Vegas also has an impact on F1. So just like there's people who think, F1 coming to Vegas was a mistake for Las Vegas, F1 could look down the road at this, say 6 months from now, a year from now, after the second year, and they could think that Las Vegas was a mistake for them. If there's one thing F1 has been very upfront about, Liberty Media, is that they want to make every single dollar possible that they can, even if they got to piss off all kinds of people, locals and tourists alike, to make that happen. So if F1 does not think that being in Vegas has given them a good enough return on investment, then they can pull out. Remember, it's a 3-year contract. Lots of people are saying 10 years. Las Vegas wants 10 years. F1 has not agreed to 10 years. So I would not expect a decision on that, no way, before the first year. I saw, some people on social media saying, oh, I heard it might just be a 1-year deal. No. Okay, no. When you end up investing $500 million like they did into this, the chance of it being a 1-year deal are pretty much zero, regardless of what you would hear on social media. So it's a 3-year contract. After the second year, I would expect F1 to be thinking more about, whether or not they want to extend it 10 years. Maybe they only extend for 1 year or 2 years. But keep in mind, for F1, this is not, they have, they make a huge amount of money. Okay, Liberty Media is the most valuable sports empire on the planet. So for them, they have no ties to Las Vegas, right? They have no connection to the community here, all right? So they came in to have this race, and this is business for them. So if they're coming in here and their business is not seeing the return on investment that they wanted to, they could say, okay, we're out, 3-year contract, we're done. They tried Vegas, they didn't like it, and they're going to move on. That is something that I think does not get talked about a whole lot, is that, so much of it circles around, is F1 worth it for Vegas? But the flip side is F1 has to think Vegas is worth it for them. So going into next year, how ticket prices work out, how many they're able to sell, the demand, because we all saw about how the ticket prices were dropping and there was still the amount of tickets still available for sale that you could get as the race was getting closer. So if the demand is not there, F1's probably going to pull and they're going to say, hey, see you later. That's just business. So to wrap it up, the tourists, I think, are much more likely to think this was a great event and want it back. I feel pretty comfortable saying that, though, the majority of the locals don't see a direct benefit of F1 being in Las Vegas. And I unfortunately think that the divide that I mentioned earlier in this video is going to continue with F1, at the very least in the near future, maybe even in the long term.